Rempe-Mania is back on Broadway for another 2 seasons, and we tell you why this is great news for the New York Rangers.
You're Locked on the New York Rangers, your daily podcast on the New York Rangers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back, Blue Shirts fans, to episode number 1334 of the Locked On New York Rangers podcast. I'm your host, Jon Chik. Just want to thank you guys, as always, for making Locked On New York Rangers your first listen every day. We are free and available on all platforms, including YouTube, and we are, of course, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So we had breaking news just yesterday. In fact, it was just a couple of minutes after I recorded yesterday's episode, we got the breaking news that Matt Rempe has indeed re-signed with the New York Rangers on a 2-year contract worth $975,000 per season. And I got to say right off the bat here, I love this deal for the New York Rangers for a couple of different reasons. The biggest reason, honestly, might be that it's almost impossible to find any good reason not to do this. Certain Ranger fans tried, because Rempe certainly does have at least a few dissenters out there, to be sure. But for the most part, like I said, I don't think there's really any real reason not to do this. And I'm going to illustrate what I mean by that, going through these lists of the good reasons why it made sense for the Rangers to hang on to Matt Rempe and do so at such a reasonable price. For starters, we've talked, many of us have talked, you guys have all talked, basically Ranger fans everywhere have talked about the very simple fact that the Rangers need to add more size and more physicality, add more edge, more sandpaper, and all that good stuff. Every team in the NHL could certainly use more of all of those things. And while I do think that 2 years ago, the Rangers were a more physical team than they got credit for, that seemed to kind of evaporate this past season. This team just did not play with any real grit, any real north-south hockey of any kind, any physicality, any nastiness whatsoever. And it's one of many, many reasons why this team fell light years short of any and all expectations that we had for them this past season. So again, 2 years ago, I thought the physicality was there more so than a lot of Ranger fans would give this team credit for. But again, it wasn't there this past season. And Matt Rempe brings physicality and toughness and nastiness in spades. Even the biggest Rempe naysayer, doubter, critic, whoever you might be out there, you can't take that away from him. In his career so far, Matt Rempe, 167 hits in 59 games, and he's racked up that many hits while averaging only 7 minutes and 41 seconds of ice time per net. So when this dude is on the ice, he's out there hitting everything that moves, and I think most Ranger fans, even if you're not the biggest Rempe fan, like I said, I think you'll at least appreciate that he can bring that to the table for a team that definitely needs it. I've also personally, and I don't think I'm alone here, become a big fan of the Rangers' likely fourth line trio of Adam Edstrom, Sam Carrick, and Matt Rempe. And I tweeted out yesterday after the news of this Matt Rempe extension broke that, unironically, one of the least concerning aspects of the New York Ranger team next season is that fourth line. Now, we don't know for sure if that's going to be the exact fourth line night in and night out throughout the entire season, but just kind of eyeballing it, looking at the lay of the land here, I think there's that's probably the front-running trio for that fourth line. We don't know that for sure, but you look at this past season for the Rangers, and there were a lot of games, probably too many if we're being honest, where that fourth line, that trio, once again, Edstrom, Carrick, and Rempe, that was the Rangers' best line on the ice. And we didn't get enough of that fourth line. Part of the reason is because Rempe started the season in the AHL. Or I think he actually started on the Rangers, but went down to the AHL in relatively short order. So he played 18 games with the Wolfpack. He wasn't around for that much time at the beginning of the season. And then Edstrom, unfortunately, suffered an injury. And we're actually going to talk about Adam Edstrom a little bit later in today's episode as well. He is an RFA with arbitration rights as we speak. But the bottom line, when these three were together, they were very effective. They were out there playing physical hockey. They were spending good chunks of their shifts in the offensive zone, going to work, and probably giving you at least a little bit more offense than was to be expected. That's not to say that they were offensive juggernauts. And if you're looking for this fourth line to carry the team next season, I think you're going to be disappointed. You can't put that much expectations on your fourth line, whether it's these guys or anybody else. But in terms of just a trio of players, a line that is going to go out there and do their job, do what's asked of them, do what's expected of them, and give you an honest effort night in and night out, again, this is a trio that I do not worry about next season because we saw that. These guys go out there and they play blue-collar physical hockey for the most part, pretty much night in and night out last season. I know there's some people, and I tweeted out that, I am a fan of this line, and there were a couple of people that point out the fact that, Rempe and Carrick do take too many penalties. That is true. Rempe seemed to get that a little bit more under control in the waning parts of last season. And Carrick, he's a veteran. He's got to know better. He's got to do better in that aspect of the game. So I can at least acknowledge those concerns. But for the most part, I really liked what I saw from this line last season. And given that a lot of you guys responded to that tweet that I sent out, I think a lot of you were fans of the work that this line put in last season as well. Another reason why I like the re-signing is this team just needs a little bit more personality. We focus so much, and understandably so, on this team needing more size and more edge and more nastiness, maybe some more speed as well, some more secondary scoring, some more passion for the game for sure, some more energy, right? Something else that this team sorely lacked last season, and I don't think it really has been talked about all that much, is personality. What was this team last season? What was the Rangers' personality? Imagine trying to describe the Ranger collective personality to somebody that's never watched hockey before. What would you even say to them? Like, you've got a friend, we've all got that friend, we try to get them into hockey and they just won't give it a chance because, reasons. But if you were trying to like hook your team on, or hook a friend of yours on Ranger hockey last season, how would you sell it to them in terms of like what this team's personality was, right? And look, I realize you can't turn your team into a circus, right? But this is pro hockey. This is pro sports. We watch this to be entertained. We watch this to have fun. And there was nothing about this Ranger team really that was entertaining or fun this past season. Matt Rempe gives you some of that. He gives you that physicality. He gives you those bone-jarring hits. He will drop the gloves when the occasion calls for it. And again, even if you're not the biggest Matt Rempe fan, you don't understand all the hype, you don't get why so many Ranger fans love this guy so much, I don't care who you are, at one time or another, you have been entertained by something that Matt Rempe has done on the ice during a hockey game. You have, obviously reacted to one of those big hits that he has, going in on the forecheck, knocking somebody in the glass, shaking the glass, and all that good stuff. If Matt Rempe is dropping the gloves, you're not going to use that time to go make a sandwich, right? You're not going to look away from the TV when Matt Rempe is dropping the gloves. So if nothing else, he's certainly an entertaining player as well. There's nobody that's ever not had a moment with Matt Rempe where you're entertained or glued to the TV with something that he either has just done or is about to do in the case of, dropping the gloves or what have you. So there's that to consider as well. This team needs more personality. I think he's certainly a well-liked player in that locker room. I've always gotten that impression. And somebody that's just willing to go out there and do whatever it takes to give his team a little bit of an edge and a chance to win the game. Also, here's another reason I love the re-signing. Matt Rempe, again, unironically, one of the very, very, very few players on this New York Ranger team that improved last season from the season prior. Nearly everybody else took a step back. And granted, some of those players, guys like Artemi Panarin, guys like Trocheck, they set the bar very high for themselves with career seasons the year prior. And in some ways, I guess you could say there was nowhere to go but down. But we saw a lot of different players on this Ranger team basically just fall off a cliff from where they were 2 seasons ago to where they were this past season, the one that just concluded. Matt Rempe was not one of those players. Matt Rempe and I would say Will Cooley are basically the only 2 players on this New York Ranger team that very noticeably improved from 2 years ago to this past year. Now, with Rempe, part of the reason you can make for this, and maybe the Rempe naysayers will beat me to the punch here, part of the reason you could say he improved is that he kind of had to by default because the season before, it was 1 goal and 1 assist in 17 games. He averaged 5 minutes and 38 seconds of ice time per night. In a way, there's nowhere to go, but forget about the stats. Just go by the eye test, go by his skating, go by, making better passes. I think somebody that just got a better feel for the game this past season overall. And again, you're not wrong if you say that there's nowhere to go but up, and that's why Rempe improved. But this is somebody that I think is trying very hard to improve his all-around game in various aspects, and somebody that isn't content just going out there and being pigeonholed as an enforcer. Certainly he'll do all that stuff when the occasion calls for it, but we've heard Rempe in interviews talk about how much he wants to improve in this area of the game, that area of the game, and one area that I think he undeniably got better was his skating. He was just looking a lot better, a lot more mobile for somebody certainly of his size. And I think that's going to bode well for him for his future. As far as other Rangers that improved, again, to me, the list is very short. You're looking at Cooley and you're looking at Rempe. You could maybe throw Adam Edstrom in there as well. And we're going to talk about Edstrom, like I said, a little bit later in today's episode. But with Edstrom, it's kind of the same deal as Rempe, where there was in some ways nowhere to go but up. Edstrom only played 11 games in his rookie season, or I guess that wouldn't really count as his rookie season, but he played 11 games his first season in the league, got an injury, and then came back this past season and played 51 games. So naturally, he would probably improve as well. But that's about it. I mean, can you name me another Ranger who did better this past season than they did the season before? Rempe did. So that is another reason why I like him. He's an improving player. There's no reason to move on from him in a trade or what have you. I think certainly this is somebody that you hang on to, especially at the price that the Rangers paid to re-sign Matt Rempe, which is the next thing that I'm going to talk about here. See, this is where certain Ranger fans, and certainly I respect like all opinions. If you don't like Rempe, I get it. He's not everybody's cup of tea, but this is where certain Ranger fans really lose me, because there are Ranger fans who are mad, like angry that the Rangers re-signed Matt Rempe. Matt Rempe is signed for 2 years. He will then be an RFA, and then 2 years after that, he will be a UFA, and we'll cross those bridges when we get to them. But the price for bringing back Matt Rempe this past season, I must repeat this, is $975K per year. The league minimum is $775K per year. So Matt Rempe is only $200K over the league minimum. Is there better use of that money that the Rangers could go with? Like, I guess in theory, maybe some of these people wanted the Rangers to trade Matt Rempe for like a 4th round draft pick, maybe a 4th round draft pick, and then go out and sign somebody at the league minimum, all in an effort just to save $200K per season. What's the point? I know you have to make every dollar count, and every dollar does matter, especially when you're dealing with the NHL salary cap. But Matt Rempe is essentially costing the Rangers $200K for the next 2 seasons, because you have to fill out your roster somehow, and you can't do it for less than $775K per year. So Rempe's at $975K. It's $200K. Like, you have to have players on your roster to fill out your roster. And this is somebody with a very unique skill set and somebody that's gone out there and busted his tail every night. It's a homegrown prospect, a 6th rounder, somebody that's beat the odds to even make it to the NHL, somebody that goes out there and throws the body on a team that needs desperately more of that. What am I missing here? What is the downside to re-signing Matt Rempe? Are there other 4th liners around the league? Are there other guys around the league making 6 figures right now that are future slam dunk Hall of Famers, that are perennial all-stars? Did I miss something here? Rempe has his drawbacks. I think certainly his defensive game is an area where he can improve, and there's some other things as well. But again, this is the homegrown kid that comes in and plays hard every night and throws the body and plays physical. Like what am I missing here that this is a bad move for the New York Rangers? Even if he's not your favorite player, I don't know how you look at this and say like, oh, that's terrible. That the Rangers are doomed because they re-signed Matt Rempe at $975K. I don't get it. So that's kind of where I'm at. I think it's an awesome move for the Rangers. You can't beat the price. And with all that said, I certainly like the fact that Matt Rempe has been locked up for at least the next 2 years, and hopefully beyond that as well. You can't go overboard as far as the price, but I don't think the Rangers are going to have to do that. So Matt Rempe back in the fold with the Rangers, and I, for one, am very happy about that. We're going to keep talking about Matt Rempe in just a second. I think a very important question that a lot of us probably have right now as it pertains to Matt Rempe is, how will he be used by Mike Sullivan and the Ranger coaching staff? This could really go either way for a player like Matt Rempe, and I think it depends. His role depends largely on how the coaching staff feels about him. And I'm going to explain what I mean by that in just a second and go into further detail. All right, we just want to take a minute to let everybody know that today's episode of Locked On New York Rangers is brought to you by Wonderful Pistachios. Looking for a snack that is both delicious and nutritious? Crack into a good source of protein with Wonderful Pistachios. Wonderful Pistachios is one of the highest protein nuts. Each 1 ounce serving has 6 grams of protein, giving you over 10% of your daily value. Plus, they are packed with fiber and better for you unsaturated fats to help keep you feeling fuller longer. You gotta love the no shells variety. It is the perfect grab and go snack for busy days. Whether you're at your desk, on the run, or whatever you might be doing, they are always an amazing go-to. And if you love cracking open every shell for that satisfying crunch, the in-shell options are always a classic favorite. Whether you're running between meetings or dropping off the kids, Wonderful Pistachios are the snack that works just as hard as you do. Get snacking and get cracking with the snack that packs a protein punch. Visit wonderfulpistachios.com to learn more. All right, let's go ahead and keep everything rolling here on Locked On New York Rangers. Big shout out to the everydayers, as always, for sticking with this podcast throughout the offseason, throughout what was obviously a very difficult regular season for the New York Rangers as well. Not sure 100% what we're doing in the next episode, but I know in due time here, we are going to do a crossover episode with Locked On Ducks to discuss the Kreider trade. Be interesting to see it from the Ducks perspective and just talk about that and everything going on with both teams. But for right now, let's keep the focus on Matt Rempe, who once again did just sign this 2-year extension. The big question that I think a lot of Ranger fans have right now, myself included, is how will the Rangers use Matt Rempe this upcoming season? I think this is a really interesting question because I think a player like Matt Rempe, more so or just as much or nearly as much as any other player in the league, their usage, when you've got a player with this very unique skill set, is going to depend very largely on how the coaching staff feels about them, how the coaching staff perceives their value. And on one hand, I mean, I guess in the most literal sense, you could say this about any player in the NHL. You know, your usage and your role on the team is going to depend on, you know, how the coaching staff feels about you. It does come down to the coach's decision. But I think it's even more true for somebody like Matt Rempe, because how much do they value somebody that's going to go out there and just basically bang people into the boards and play a very physical style and drop the gloves when it's necessary? Lavlet seemed to be a fan of Matt Rempe. He didn't have him out there every night. There were times, obviously, where, you know, he was a healthy scratch. And of course, he did spend some time with the Hartford Wolfpack for a spell last season, 18 games to be exact. But once he got called back up, that's when he mostly became a fixture in the Ranger lineup for most of the rest of the season. And he ended up playing 42 games with the Rangers, 18 games with the Wolfpack. But Lavlet seemed to be something of a fan of Rempe. And even the season before that, when the Rangers were in the playoffs, they ended up playing in 16 postseason games that year. Rempe was dressed for 11 of them. You're not going to do that if you don't have at least some faith, some confidence that Matt Rempe brings something positive to the table. So Lavlet seemed to have trust in Matt Rempe to be in the lineup more often than not. However, the one big thing with Lavlet, he would only play him in certain situations. And during Rempe's first season, I completely understood this because, what was he, like 20 years old at the time? And he's joining this Ranger team that, I don't know if they had the best record in the NHL when Rempe made his debut, but they were up there, and they obviously ended up with the best record in the NHL that season. They've got guys having career years, and nevertheless, they still carved out a role for Matt Rempe. But what Lavlet did, which I understood at the time, was he wouldn't put Rempe out there in crunch time. It was understandable because Rempe's still getting his feet wet and whatnot. But if the Rangers were tied, up by a goal, down by a goal late in a game, Matt Rempe was not going to see the ice. And again, I agreed with that philosophy at the time. However, this past season, it seemed to kind of continue that way. You know, Rempe got a little bit more ice time this past season, but even on nights like I was talking about earlier, where that fourth line was the best Ranger line on the ice, and they were out there having good shift after good shift after good shift, it's like Lavlet couldn't adjust to that. And we get into a situation in the third period where, again, tie game or a one-goal game either way, and Rempe would be glued to the bench. You can understand it a little bit more if the Rangers are down by a goal, because then you want to go with your big offensive threats. But like tie game, down by a goal, or rather up by a goal, I don't think it's a crime against humanity if Matt Rempe takes his shift. You know what I mean? There was no reason for him to be glued to the bench in the third period as often as he was, especially on nights, like I said, where that fourth line was really playing well. So I didn't like that. I thought it was overdone a little bit, how often they would kind of just take Matt Rempe out of the equation. And all of this really just begs the question to how Mike Sullivan views Matt Rempe and how he might deploy Matt Rempe similarly or differently from how Peter Lavlet did. One thing that you have to keep in mind here, whether you love Rempe, you don't like Rempe at all, or you're somewhere in between, there's going to be some serious competition for the bottom parts of the Ranger roster. If you look at the Ranger forwards right now, there are 6 of them who I think you can pretty much pencil in to the opening night roster, assuming that we don't get a surprising trade of some kind between now and then. But the 6 that I'm talking about, in no particular order: Panarin, Mika, JT Miller, Lafreniere, Trocheck, and Cooley. Those 6 are going to be out there. That's probably your top 6 right there, if we're being honest, in whatever order, whatever alignment you want to go with. And we'll discuss that in a future episode. But those 6 will be there, assuming that none of them get traded. After that, you know, the bottom 6, you're looking at any combination of 9 different players that I wrote down here. We've got Perreault, we've got Othman and Berard. Those are, you know, the prospects. Then we've got guys like Parsonen, Carrick, Matt Rempe himself, Johnny Brodzinski. And then you've got two players who are RFAs with arbitration rights who I would think the Rangers would probably re-sign. They're Adam Edstrom and Arthur Kaliev. So right there, it's 9 guys for 6 spots. Maybe one of them is a healthy scratch. And this is to say nothing of any free agents that the Rangers might sign or any deals they might swing between now and the start of this upcoming season. So this really comes down, as far as Matt Rempe's usage is concerned, to Sullivan's personal preference and maybe even some matchups as well. We'll address the matchups first. If you're in a battle or you're expecting a battle with a team like the Caps, Tom Wilson's out there. We know that. Any of your division rivals, whether it's the Islanders, the Penguins, the Flyers, teams where you expect the nastiness to be there and you expect the intensity to be there and the chippiness to be there. Any game like that, Matt Rempe is probably going to have a better chance of being in the lineup than he would against like just some random team from the Western Conference, right? That stands to reason. But it also comes down to Mike Sullivan and his personal preference, basically. Does he prefer a bruiser like Matt Rempe over a guy with a nasty shot like Arthur Kaliev? We don't know. That remains to be seen, and we'll see. And it might be touch and go. You might see those guys in and out of the lineup, that the two of them could rotate, have some kind of a rotation. That's possible. Does he also, Sullivan, prefer somebody like Juuso Parssinen over Matt Rempe? Parssinen himself is very big and a very physical player as well. Not quite as big as Rempe, not quite as physical as Rempe, but Parssinen does bring both of those things. And he also brings a little bit more offense than Matt Rempe. So would Sullivan, sacrifice a little bit of the physicality of Matt Rempe to go with a guy that is still physical like Parssinen and also gives you a little bit more offense? Again, that remains to be seen. That we'll see how it goes. And to be fair, Sullivan might not even know the answers to those questions right now. He might be going in there with, everything is kind of a blank canvas, and he's going to watch these guys, obviously in practice, training camp, obviously the preseason. That's a great time to, get a feel for what this team is going to look like and who's going to make this team and who's going to be in the lineup, who's going to be out of the lineup. But if Matt Rempe is going to be in the lineup, then I think his role is pretty clear. It's pretty cut and dry. You're going to see him out there on the 4th line. No surprises there. You could occasionally see him moved up in the lineup if there's like a lopsided game and let's just throw him out there with some of the skill guys and see how things go. I don't know. The opposing team might see that as an act of war if you do that. So maybe you don't want to do that. But, for the most part, Matt Rempe is obviously going to be out there in a 4th line role. You're probably looking at him getting around like 9 minutes per night. This past season, he was at 8:30. So I think 9:30, maybe 10 is reasonable, depending on how everything goes. But I would expect probably single digits as far as time on the ice, as far as how many minutes. I don't think he'll quite get to 10. And he's going to do what he does. He'll hit, he'll fight. He'll hopefully grind out some tough offensive zone possessions when his line is on the ice. He'll mix it up after the play. He'll be a deterrent. He'll get in people's faces. All the things that we've come to know about Matt Rempe, he's going to do those things this upcoming season. But I do want to throw out something bold as far as a potential role that Matt Rempe could have next season. Because everything I just said there, 4th line, limited ice time, you guys can figure that out yourselves. I want to throw out at least one bold thing here. You guys can let me know what you think about it. What about Matt Rempe? And I did mention this once or twice last season when the Rangers were doing whatever they were doing. I don't know if you can call it playing hockey on most nights. But the idea that I threw out there, Matt Rempe on the 2nd power play unit. Now, this is going to depend on what the Rangers do this offseason. How many guys are leaving? How many guys are coming in? There were rumors that Alexis Lafreniere could be traded. I'm against that move wholeheartedly. I don't think it's going to happen. And there was actually a report not long ago, I think it's from Frank Saravelli, who mentioned that, Lafreniere, that there's not a lot of chatter as far as him being traded right now. So I'll bring Lafreniere back and not sell low on him. But who are the Rangers going to bring in? Who's going to be gone? How many spots are available on the power play units? You're not going to put Matt Rempe on the top power play. Not even close. Forget about it. Certainly not at this point in his career. The 2nd power play, the Raiders had some trouble filling out both power play units last season. And that's kind of an indictment on these players and how poorly they played last season. But as far as like Rempe being your 10th power play guy, just stick him in front of the net and just let him set up shop there. Who's going to move him out of the crease? Especially when you're on the penalty kill. I don't know that you're going to be able to move him out of the crease 5v5, but the penalty kill, obviously, you got to be very cognizant of where you are on the ice, and your positioning is very important. Are they really going to waste one of their penalty killers trying to move Matt Rempe out of the crease when he doesn't want to be moved? It's kind of a futile battle, right? So let him set up shop there. Let him screen the goalie. Maybe he gets a deflection or two. He actually, he scored on a deflection near the end of last season, and there were a couple others where he had a chance. Maybe I'm overselling it a little bit, but I wouldn't mind seeing Matt Rempe in that role with the Rangers. And again, we'll see what the lay of the land is and what this roster looks like. But I would say, if nothing else, mess around with this in training camp, mess around with this, certainly in the preseason. That's when you experiment. You try some different things. You see what works and you see what doesn't work. And give Matt Rempe a shot as a net front presence on the second power play. I see no reason why not to at least experiment with it. But in just a second, we're going to actually shift our attention to Matt Rempe's line mate, or his probable line mate. That would, of course, be Adam Edstrom. He himself is an RFA with arbitration rights, and we're doing this throughout the entire offseason, where we look at every single free agent on the Rangers, and we're going to talk about Matt Edstrom in just a second. All right, I want to wrap up today's episode by discussing Matt Edstrom. I'm combining, their line mates, and now I'm combining their names. We're going to talk about Adam Edstrom, who very likely will play with Matt Rempe this upcoming season. We've seen that quite a bit, in their first 2 years when they've both been healthy and both been available. But Adam Edstrom needs a new contract. His 3-year ELC just expired. That carried a cap hit of $847K per season. And Edstrom, like I mentioned a second ago, currently an RFA with arbitration rights. And there's a lot of similarities between Edstrom and Rempe. Obviously, the first thing you notice, you don't even have to be a hockey fan to notice this, is the size. These are two of the absolute skyscrapers of this league, two of the biggest players in the league, so that'll certainly get your attention right away. I think both of them are likely ticketed to a fourth line role with this Ranger team this upcoming season. And that's not to say that either one of them can't eventually climb into a top 9 role at some point in their career. I would never just pigeonhole somebody to a fourth line role for their entire career, but they're very young. They're getting going, and I think that's probably where they will start. They're both former 6-rounders, and it's part of this recent Ranger trend of drafting absolute giants in the later rounds, specifically the 6th round. We saw it with Rempe, we saw it with Edstrom, and we've actually seen it even more recently with Dylan Robrick, who had a great season with the Hartford Wolfpack this past season. Very quiet, great season for Robrick. He ended up with 20 goals and 14 assists for the Pack, and he himself is a giant. And it seems to be working, and I wholeheartedly endorse that strategy. By the time you get into the 6th and 7th round, I mean, it's a crapshoot anyway, so why not, everything else being equal, just draft somebody who's an absolute giant out there, right? It's worth a shot, and I think it's a good philosophy that the Rangers have adapted in recent seasons here. But with Edstrom, the one difference that he has from Rempe is he's not known for the bone-jarring hits. I mean, he'll hit a little bit. I think, honestly, he could probably use his frame to his advantage a little bit more often than he does, at least so far, his NHL career. But he's also not the lightning rod that Matt Rempe is, because he doesn't have those big-time bone-jarring hits like I just mentioned. He doesn't drop the gloves the way Rempe does, and he doesn't attract the attention of the NHL player of department safety. In fact, I don't think he ever has. Matt Rempe obviously has done so on multiple occasions. But there are enough similarities there. The reason I bring this up, there's enough similarities between Edstrom and Rempe where I think you could probably reason that they will get very similar contracts. And again, Matt Rempe right now, $975K per season. I would think maybe Edstrom's would be a little bit less expensive. Don't know that for sure. But maybe you're around like $900K for Edstrom. I mean, does that sound about right? I think that probably makes sense. But I'm all for bringing him back. I think Edstrom has shown enough promise. Like I said, I'm a big fan of that fourth line. And if you were to trade Edstrom, I mean, the return would be so minimal that it wouldn't even be worth it. There's no reason to trade a 6th-round, very young player who already is probably performing beyond what his draft status would indicate. There's a lot of 6th-rounders that never play a game in the NHL. And Adam Edstrom has already done exactly that. He's in the NHL, and I think he's shown some promise. He, twice now in his 2 seasons, has sort of become the forgotten man, which is unfortunate. But we saw him suffer injuries toward the end of both seasons and be taken out of the equation. And you just really hope that that does not become a trend with Adam Edstrom. Fingers crossed that that's not the case. But 62 career games for Edstrom so far, 7 goals, 4 assists, -3, 94 hits while averaging 9 minutes and 16 seconds of ice time. But beyond the stats, I think the thing that really gets your attention as it pertains to Edstrom is very simply that size and speed combination. This does not grow on trees. This guy's an absolute giant, and he can absolutely fly. a lot of Ranger fans, and I include myself in this as well, we're all guilty of the same thing. We talk about Adam Edstrom, and obviously the size is there, and we can all see that with our eyes. But we always say something along the lines of, for a big skater, for a big guy, Adam Edstrom is a really good skater. For somebody that's got such a massive frame, he's actually got pretty good speed. We're selling him short when we say that. Forget about the size. Adam Edstrom is a good skater, and Adam Edstrom is very fast. There was a chart going around. I tried very hard to find it for today's episode. I saw it months ago. I mean, who knows where it is? Somewhere in the doldrums of Twitter somewhere, right? But there was a chart going around that showed the fastest skaters in the NHL, and one of the categories was straight line speed. Adam Edstrom was on that list, the top 25. Now, he was closer to 25 than he was to number 1, but the fact remains the same. This guy was one of the fastest straight line speeders. Okay, fastest straight line skaters in the NHL this past season. So forget about good skater for his size. Forget about fast for his size. No, he's just a good skater, and he's fast. He's got great speed. He's one of the fastest Rangers on the team. And there's a team that could probably stand to add a little bit more speed as well. There's so much emphasis right now with the Rangers on physicality and size and nastiness, and I get it. They need a little bit more speed as well. I've never looked at them as a slow team, but even when they were winning the President's Trophy, I didn't really look at them as like a blazing fast team either, So if Edstrom can bring that to the table, and he can, I mean, his speed's not going to go anywhere, at least not until he gets quite a bit older. So that's great as well. And something else I'll throw out there too, while we're comparing Edstrom and Rempe, I think that Edstrom might actually have a better chance of becoming a permanent fixture in the Ranger lineup than Matt Rempe does, at least initially. And it's going to depend on how Sullivan feels about both players. We know that. And obviously, hopefully their play dictates more than anything, what their role ends up being. But Edstrom last year under Lavlet, he was the guy that was in the lineup night in and night out. I don't remember this for sure, but I'm not sure that Edstrom was ever a healthy scratch last season. And if he was, it didn't happen very often. Whereas Rempe certainly was a healthy scratch on certain nights. He got sent down to the AHL. Edstrom was the guy that stuck more so than Matt Rempe. And they were both out there quite a bit toward the end of the season. But Edstrom had earned his spot. Edstrom was in the lineup every single night for this Ranger team. And I think you could see something similar this year. He's going to have to go out and earn it because he is still a young player, former 6th-round pick. It's not like this is somebody that's going to have a roster spot handed to him and a big role handed to him. But he went out and took it last season. He started with that Rangers-Flyers, rookie camp that they do, those 2 games. He was a standout in that. And then it continued into practice, training camp, the preseason, and he earned his spot fair and square. And I think he's going to do the same thing this year. I think you will see Adam Edstrom out there on opening night on the 4th line for the New York Rangers. And I'm looking forward to seeing that. Again, I think that 4th line could be a ton of fun. But we will call it there for today. Thank you guys, as always, for tuning in, and I will see you next time.